definitely don't feel as crazy, or I guess maybe even unintelligent, as I was beginning to think I could possibly be in regards to the Idaho 4 PCA, written to garner the arrest warrant for Brian Koberger. Obviously, we're talking about the tragic quadruple homicide of Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and of course Ethan that we all want solved. And we all have been picking apart this PCA and getting called crazy by many of people that think that they fully understand it. I'm A.R. Hayes. I'm an ex-con. And today, I heard a team of highly qualified defense counsel members that are defending Brian Koberger in this case. And they are death penalty certified. These are not beginners in what they do. And they stood before the court, looked the judge directly in the eyes, and said the PCA doesn't make sense to them, and it doesn't add up to how they got to Brian Koberger in the investigation. Does that ring anybody's bells out there that there's just something that is just not quite adding up? Sure, if you've already convicted him and found him guilty in your mind, and you feel as though, as you're watching this play out, that this is the way a fair trial and due process should happen, well, that's your prerogative. Let's just, we'll see how you feel if and when one of your dear loved ones or friends are sitting in this very scenario and we're watching this same process, the way it's happening in this case, roll out in your loved one's case. I've sat in that defendant's chair, as I've told many of you before, and there's always a difference in feelings when you know you're guilty and you're just fighting, compared to when you truly feel as though due process and a fair trial will show your innocence. And I've spoken. You're not going to be bouncing off of the walls and jumping up and down screaming your innocence. It's not the way this works, but I'll tell you the way it does work is exactly what you saw in the courtroom in Moscow, Idaho, Latah County, January 26th of 2024, when defense counsel Ann Taylor was directly speaking to Judge and breaking down the reasoning of why the trial just possibly shouldn't even happen in the summer of 2025. His fear that a year and a half from now, the evidence just still might not add up. And I'm going to tell you, in my mind, the PCA never made sense. And I know there's a lot of experts out there that have worked in the field, written many PCAs, that know more about them. And I give them a lot of credit for that. They do know more about them. But I know what I've seen in many of PCAs of my own and others that have been incarcerated reading their paperwork. So I've seen a lot of PCAs through my years. At this one, it just never seemed right. And I found myself questioning it over and over and over and methodically going through it, not so much to find errors. I just kind of wanted to find some actual evidence based upon known fact truth. And I struggled with that. and I was pulling my hair out over it. But today I literally get to see Ann Taylor stand up in a very methodical way state it doesn't add up. And we know, just based off of some of the descriptions and discussion that she was having, kind of where she's going to head in attacking this case. There's a lot of things that are going to play key roles in this case on whether, at the end of the day, the full picture is going to add up and make sense. Now, does the full picture have to add up and make sense for somebody to be found guilty? No, absolutely not. No. A lot of times, I think many of us that follow true crime just don't quite understand why someone did something and how the entirety of the case led to the end result. Now, we're not going to say that we didn't feel as though they were guilty at the end of the day. We just didn't fully understand the realm of the full crime. And I believe in the Idaho 4, as many of us are dissecting it and discussing it and breaking it into pieces and methodically going over everything, it's still not going to make sense. And that's scary to think about. One of the reasons why it doesn't make sense is because not all the evidence is even back yet, but we're in a courtroom arguing on whether we should be going to trial in just a mere few months. A lot of people have attacked, and this is just an example, they've gone after Brian Kohberger for his alibi, not actually knowing and fully understanding Brian Kohberger has not given his official alibi. Why is that so hard for people to understand? I guess it's not always well explained on the way that the court process works when it comes to that. Because I've had to endure it, I kind of get it. Within the original scheduling order, when we were looking at the speedy trial direction for this case, the judge had set deadlines for certain things to happen, both by the defense and by the prosecution. One of those being that the defense had to discoverable to the prosecution what said alibi for Brian Kohberger, if he wanted to utilize an alibi within his defense, what that would be. The defense started preparing that, and that date came, but here's what people are missing. That all got vacated due to the fact the speedy trial was waived. All of those orders that were in effect at that time of certain dates for things that had to happen by certain time frames went out the window. The defense offered to the prosecution a very, very basic alibi that was going to be based upon evidence that was made through discovery and also through expert witness testimony. Ladies and gentlemen, today, January 26th, Ann Taylor gave you a direct view of exactly why that alibi has not actually been given. They're still waiting on the cast reports. They're still trying to determine the actual cell phone information. These have not come back. All right? The evidence is not there yet. Meaning that that discoverable evidence that the defense is waiting for to utilize within their alibi defense is not back. And there's no experts that have weighed in regards to said evidence to build that alibi defense. That way it could be turned over to the prosecution and utilized within his trial. So for those people that are stating that because he did not come out with a very solid original alibi, he's got to be guilty. No, he left it open-ended to allow discoverable evidence to support what he is going to utilize as an alibi. It's easy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this case is going to come down to video footage. I think today's hearing made that quite clear when Ann Taylor directly stated the very, very, very important video footage. They don't have all of it. Isn't that kind of odd? Think about that. It's kind of odd. You have video footage of a very, very, very important part of the case, but you don't have all of it. So the prosecution doesn't have all of it either. And I get it. These videos are probably multi-videos that they're trying to piece together to build the said evidence out of numerous video cameras and audio. But how is the prosecution utilizing this as very, very, very important evidence, on top of the fact they're stating they're clearly ready to go to trial, if they haven't even got all of that themselves and put it together, and then on top of that made it discoverable to the defense? There's a lot to wade through on this. With things that were said in the courtroom, it's very clear to those that really listen, really watch for the key discussion points of what's being said, on top of having some experience of being in that courtroom setting, either as a defendant or in a jury, in some manner being there. You pick up on things. And it's very clear this case's evidence is either A, not solid, or B, it's incomplete. So, as a country that believes in equality and fair due process across the board, where people's voices, thoughts are heard, and, we base our country on being the pride and joy and the best that we could be. And this case, the Idaho 4, is a clear showing of how we're falling short just within the judicial side of criminal cases. And it's getting to the point that this is being seen more and more and more. There are many cases on the dockets right now that all have questions across the board. And why is that? Because they're becoming more visible. 10 years ago, there was not the vision on the justice system that there is today. And that's where people are beginning to open their eyes and see these issues. Now we're starting to realize that prosecutors used to bring cases, and still are to this day, that maybe were not ready to actually be brought to trial. But they pushed it through anyway, and somehow, via good emotional discussion, convince 12 jurors that somebody was guilty, not even utilizing real and true evidence. There are great speakers in this world that can convince people of things just through the tone of their voice and the way that they discuss and they talk. They could convince you to believe one thing when it's completely not even true. And today, Ann Taylor stood before that judge and laid out a solid framework of pointing that out at the prosecution. She did it very respectfully. She did not disrespect the court. She did not put any disrespect on the prosecution. She just clearly stated, I put in for a lack of evidence within my dismissal motion for a reason which you denied. However, I'm clearly showing you the evidence isn't back. I'm leaking this out through my discussion directly to you, Your Honor. You didn't want to take into consideration my request for dismissal, with a part of that being lack of evidence. And I'm demonstrating to you in live court right now, where nobody could shut me down by a gag order, because you brought up the idea of when I could be ready for trial, and I'm going to directly tell you why I'm not. You opened this door, Judge, and I'm telling you, not only am I giving you the reasoning of why I'm not ready to go to trial anytime soon, but I'm telling you, you should have heard me out more on the lack of evidence, because now it's out and about. It's out for all to see and discuss and weigh in on. And there's some great minds out here that dig in deep and put in a lot of work. And if they're struggling to piece together the PCA, and they're struggling to piece together how all this evidence adds up to Brian Kohberger, that many great minds can't be as foolish as just someone like myself sitting on the couch daydreaming, thinking about things and trying to figure things out. It's just my thoughts. So much kind of just triggered and happened within that courtroom today. There's a lot to actually talk about now. And that's not even getting into the fact that the judge doesn't want to even reconsider his decision. So, here we go with another judge that just is going to stick with his decision because he's always right. And we're going to find out, how's he going to rule his courtroom moving forward now when that loud statement's been made? Hey, Your Honor, we will be filing to change a venue very soon. Mayor Hayes, I'm an ex-con. I appreciate you joining me. Another crazy day in the courtroom with the Idaho 4. Have a good day.